So we want to know, what more do you want to know? I'm going to turn it over to Heather to start us off with some of the questions that are still outstanding in the chat.
Okay, thanks, Karen. We're going to go back. So this might be a little bit jumbly, and anybody on the panel is welcome to jump in. How would a performance fundraising contract be accounted for? I'm not actually sure what
I think that question had to do with when you were paying professional fundraisers.
Okay.
So I think if you maybe are doing a concert and you pay somebody for that, is that considered a professional fundraiser? Any ideas, Larry? You're muted.
Sorry, that's a bit tough. Is there any clarification on that?
Grace, can we unmute Alan? Can Alan unmute himself and say what his question is more about?
Yeah, you can go ahead and unmute when you're ready.
Okay, if anybody.
Are you hearing me?
Yep,
Yes.
we hear you.
Perfect. So I was just trying to type a response to the question, so thank you for letting me speak. In terms of a major capital improvement project, we have chosen to hire a professional fundraising firm. Now, the way the hiring was arranged, it was by contract, and if they don't perform, they don't get paid. There is a minimum monthly payment schedule, but there's also a clause in the contract for repayment should performance not be achieved even to that level. So on the T3010, is that a fundraising? Is that a yes to the fundraising question or no?
I would say yes.
I'd say if you actually paid them, that probably it's yes. Because you're reporting on what you paid, right? Whether or not you paid them anything. So if you had the contract, but you didn't pay them anything, you don't have to report. But if you actually paid them in the year, I would maybe put it down there.
Yeah.
Does that answer?
You also have to complete, there's a question there, and it says that you also have to complete a table on page 7 on confidential information.
Okay, thank you for the guidelines.
If an elder is paid for supply, is C8 a yes, or only if it's over $500?
Now that's an elder,
It's a reimbursement of expenses, right? It's not part of the T4A.
Well, no, if they're given an honorarium for doing a supply for talking.
Oh, in that case, it will be if it is over $500.
And if it's under $500?
No.
No.
Well, yeah, I think the question was, does that impact that question C8?
Yeah, whether or not.
Yeah, it definitely, as Oliver says, affects it. You need a T4A if it's over 500. But
It's whether any of the directors got paid, right? That question.
Yeah, if there's one payment to an elder for supply during the year, I'm not sure I would make that mean C8 was a yes. If you're using elders regularly and paying them regularly, I probably it would be.
Great, thanks, Bill.
Okay, does 4510 include grants from the PCC or Presbytery or other charities?
I think
If
so.
it's charitable, that's where it would show up.
This is an interesting one. I don't know if it came up because sometimes I get confused, but we were talking about whether or not your presbytery has charitable registration status or not. And we determined some presbyteries have charitable registration status. So if they have their charitable registration number, you should include it in that line. If they don't have the charitable registration number, then you shouldn't include it in that line. That's what I would think. Okay, Morris is agreeing with me, so I'm like, okay, good. But if it comes from national office, yes, national office has charitable registration, so you should include it in your 4510.
Okay, and if money is received through Canada Helps, does that amount go on 4510 as well?
Yep, they're another charitable registered charity, so yes.
Okay. Do we include the number of people? Deb, I'm not quite sure what this is. Issued a T4A, I think, due to honorariums over 500 as part of seasonal staff and compensation. Deb, do you want to clarify that? Can Deb unmute Grace? Yeah, okay, perfect.
Okay, so this year we've been without an organist, so we've had 3 different supply people, and I'm going to be issuing them T4As. So are they part of our number of employees, be it seasonal or whatever? Because they're not really hired by us, but they've been issued a T4A. So where do I include them?
No, I would say no. Just issue a T4A will be fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with that. I think you would just take the position that they were contractors, they weren't employees. And the T4A is the right document.
Right.
So their income is recorded where on the tax return? Under compensation, other compensation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you could either do other compensation or you even call it professional fees. I don't think it's a big issue on the T30.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and I just one more question regarding the T4A. I did not deduct any EI or CPP because they've been paid throughout the year as an honorarium. Now, none of them made like over $1,000, but should I do something about that now or just let it go?
I say just let it go. And when they file their tax return, if they need to pay, CRA will let them know.
Okay, perfect.
The other thing is that CRA do what is known as a peer review, and if there's any problems, they'll get back to you saying that you need to submit additional EI or CPP.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
but if Deb's talking about a T4A, there should never be a question of the CPP or EI. And I think you take the position that these people are contractors, not employees. I mean, it's one of the classical areas of dispute with the CRA because they'd like to get EI and CPP from employers, but employees. But I think it was for something like that, and you've got a number of people, and I think you could meet all the conditions for saying that they're contractors. Presumably, they don't come when you tell them, and they just tell you if they're available on a given Sunday. So I don't think they meet the employee test that you'd have to be concerned about deducting anything.
So I don't even need to worry about it then for 2022 because we're going to be a while before we get an organist.
No worry.
Yeah, I don't think so. If you're using a number of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Deb, you had a question about flowers as well.
Yeah, so this year we started to give receipts for gifts in kind. So flowers for the garden, a couple people paid for licenses for our copyright and so forth. So we're going to be giving them, or they got a receipt for the gift in kind. So I'm assuming this is what's recorded on the tax return under, did your charity receive a non-cash gift that was received?
Yeah, you're
Like
probably
4,000?
okay doing that because you've got clear values. I think they've probably given you a receipt or whatever. But
Yes.
but you really my advice would be don't get into that. If someone wants to buy, I can't remember what the second thing you said, the first was gardening, buy something for the church and give it to the church. And then if they want reimbursed, reimburse them and say, give me a check. I don't think you really want to get into gifts in kind for kind of, you know, Mickey Mouse amounts. If someone's giving the congregation a grand piano or something, you may want to get that valued and then give a receipt. But for smaller amounts, it just becomes a bit much.
I guess it just depends on what you want to do. And this is a little bit subjective there too, but yeah, agree.
The other thing with gifts in kind, that means that you're going to also have to fill in Schedule 5 of the T3010 if you're going to start doing all that. And I agree with Bill, try and keep it as simple as possible.
Okay, all right,
I agree with that.
will do.
Okay, and going back to the section about renting out parts of your building, someone had a question. What if they rent the manse only a few months out of the year? That was Gladys. If you'd like to speak up on that, Gladys, you're welcome to do so.
I think the simple answer is just to record the amount that is not for ministry for those months.
And I think it was answered though, that as long as the rental for the bands is going towards the church expenses, it's being used for ministry. It's really if you were running the manse as a business and not using it for church ministry, that you would record it for that, or somebody else was renting it and using it as a business and you didn't have any access to it. So, yeah.
Okay, so I did get myself unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Gladys.
Okay, so the revenue was used for expenses or updates in our manse, and it was only for a few months in the year. So that's updates to the manse directly. There may have been a portion of it used for charity.
And is the manse used normally to house the minister?
Yes, we had a vacancy, but we now have it filled.
So the minister is part of your ministry. So it's the manse is supporting the minister. It's supporting your ministry. I don't think you need to worry about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other, again, on the T3010, it requires gross income received from rental of land and or building. So you stick it on that line 4610.
4610, thank you.
Okay, next question. Are directors part of the session? How about elders or trustees? My church has put almost all church attendees on the board of managers.
Well, that was a judgment call, and that's fine. Simply be consistent. Other congregations are only putting on the session, and some congregations are or are not including the minister. So it comes down to your congregational situation, who is really making the financial decisions. Polity-wise, we would say actually the session has the ultimate power, and that is why I believe most or many congregations just list the session.
The alternative there would be to list the session and also include the trustees possibly, and at least include the treasurer so that his name is on with the CRA.
You really need to have the treasurer on there if that treasurer is going to become represent a client, is going to be able to communicate to the CRA, receive documentation, update, file, submit information. So the really critical person is the person who's communicating with the CRA. That's usually the treasurer.
Hey, thank you. Next question. What if the treasurer is not aware of the status of the CRA portal?
You better tell them.
Yes.
Treasurer should learn how to use it because CRA is using more and more online nowadays.
It was Alan who was asking that and he's left, so we'll go to the next question.
Okay. Joanne had asked if it's mandatory for Presbyterian churches to use accounting software of some type. And that had been answered. It's not, but it's definitely helpful for congregations to move to accounting software. And then Alan asked if the presbytery has a preferred software.
No, there is no preferred software. Whatever you feel comfortable with and is reasonably affordable. There is a list somewhere I saw recently.
In the treasurer's handbook.
It was in the handbook. Thank you.
Yeah.
That lists a number. I personally use Sage. Lots of people use QuickBooks. Bigger organizations may use Power Church or some of the more heavy-duty multi-purpose software. So it's up to you.
Yeah, the treasurer's handbook includes a chart based on the survey we recently held with treasurers across the country. And you can see star ratings based on what they thought of the software they're using, what software is popular with what size of church. There's a lot to be seen there. And I welcome you to download Treasurer's Handbook from the Presbyterian.ca. You can find it just by searching the term Treasurer's Handbook.
Okay, that's great. Next question, does the T4A income go on line 4880?
They're looking through their sheets right now.
No,
Can we start the Jeopardy music?
I don't think so, no. Because that line is a carry forward from another schedule,
From
from
3.
schedule 3. So you cannot actually fill in that line.
Okay. Next question, where does the loan repayment of the CEBA go?
Under expenses.
Okay.
Heather, there was one earlier on that you missed, and it was just like from Brenda, what do you mean by only copy of receipts? I was advised by CRA that we have to keep a copy of all receipts issued. I'm not quite sure what that was asking
Oh.
about.
That may have been me saying the receipt that the treasurer gives us kind of the envelope secretary gives is unusual insofar as it's not a prescribed form like a T4 or a T5, T3. So the CRA doesn't get a copy. That's probably because it's a credit rather than a income. But yeah, you're right. You either have to keep copy receipts or you have to keep the capability of reproducing what you've given out. And I think someone else had a question for how long, and it's basically 6 years after the end of the year that the stuff, any accounting record applies for.
It's an interesting one, actually. You have to keep the copy of the receipts for 2 years after the fiscal year that they ended, which usually ends up being 3 years. But you have to keep the envelopes and your backup for those receipts for the 6 to 7 years.
I believe there's quite a list on the PCC information or help for treasurers that lists all of the timelines. Some information must be kept forever.
Yeah, we covered it in one of our previous sessions. I think it was session 1, and I did review that both with Oliver and our archivist Kim to make sure it was up to date right before. So, okay, next question, Heather.
Doris, I'm not sure if this is a question. Doesn't the payment issue for directors about paying the directors for being directors? If you'd like to clarify that, Doris? If you're still here.
I think this goes back to the issue of T4As and who the compensation issue, which is on, back in line 390.
Okay.
And
I think-
it goes to Bill's statement that this whole charities return form is for small to huge entities. We don't normally compensate our directors, but in our case, if we've listed the minister as one of the directors, then we're answering yes. Often, if we don't list the minister as a director, then there's nothing on line 390.
I think I know. Doris was asking about the one person who asked, oh, if an elder was paid for, given an honorarium for providing the sermon, like doing a pulpit supply, then do they have to say that they were paid because they're a director? And I think that she's right. You only have to list that they're being paid for being a director. If they're being paid for a different service, that's okay. But your minister is being paid to be a minister and to be a director. So it definitely, if you're listing your minister, it should go on that line.
I think that clarifies it.
Great.
But you also have got to complete Schedule 3, because the question in C9 is, did the charity incur expenses for compensation of employees? So you've got to, if you've been paying the minister or you've been paying the staff, you've got to complete Schedule 3, irrespective of whether the minister is deemed a director or officer. And then the amount that you put on that line 390 goes on to the appropriate line 4880.
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question, could Bill comment on T3010 line 4891? To me, it is a real problem separating such items from the other expense areas requested.
Is that 4891? Was that the one about the education?
4891
assets.
purchase supplies and assets.
Oh, 40.
Ian, if you want to unmute yourself and ask this or join the conversation, you could.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it's the purchased items and assets, because I think it's a ridiculous question. There's purchased items in office supplies and in heating and all this stuff. So it really bugs me that they ask for that question. Maybe I'm misinterpreting it.
Yeah, I think probably you're Ian, in the sense that it's to me it's almost a catch-all question, where if you're getting anything supplies that you're not sure where it goes, stick it in there. I don't think they're really asking you to to separate too much. I tend to use it where if I've got something that doesn't go in, say advertising, clearly goes in advertising. If you've got some expenses that you think they don't go in any of those more specific ones, I'd be inclined to put it in there.
Yeah, it's a real pain. I've been separating out a whole bunch of things over the years, and it's one of the worst lines of the whole thing to fill in.
Yeah, you're probably giving yourself more work than you need. I don't. I think, as I said earlier, again, this form is meant to apply to everyone. So
yep, yeah.
I don't think the CRA cares what you spend on supplies or posts or even office supplies and expenses. I'm not sure why they have that separate from that one. There are other stuff. It tends to be regular advertising, promotion, travel and vehicle expenses, that they may have some other controls on, and those memberships perhaps, but that to me is almost a dumping ground one. I don't think I'd be too concerned about what I was putting into that one, as long as you had made a reasonable effort to spread.
They're looking for inventory and
they may be, yeah.
assets. for a large institution. They really don't care about our office supplies. They're looking for inventory. We don't carry inventory.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. Anyways, for a consistency issue, I might run a risk then of all of a sudden leaving that blank because I've been filling in for the past 10 years.
Wow. But if you've been putting $1,000 or $2,000 in there,
yeah,
that's nothing.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. That's
Okay. Next question. Just because we're nearing 4 o'clock, but I do want to be sure people's questions are answered. So.
Okay, there are several more questions.
Okay.
I have T3 forms for dividends received. However, this is not used by the general fund of the church. It's through investments, which is handled by the trustees of our church. Do I have to record this somewhere on the T3010?
Yes. Yeah. It would be under investment income earned or received 4580. Because you're doing a consolidation of all your assets when you're reporting the T3010.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, thank you. What do you do if someone refuses to supply their SIN number in order for us to issue a T4A?
You fill in 00000.
Yeah, I think you report them. My comment back was I really encourage treasurers to collect the SIN number if you have any hint early in the process, if you have any hint that someone will receive more than $500 in a year. I just make it mandatory for anyone who's hired or receiving honorariums. I want their SIN number right up front. Otherwise, they're just not eligible.
You can fill in at 0000 if you read the instructions.
Yes, they really don't like that though, do they?
I know they don't, but
so
just pass the problem over to them and they can face the person down.
right. Yeah.
You're going to be, the congregation's going to be submitting a T4A anyway, so they'll have a name and address of the individual. And whenever they do file their tax return, they'll check to see that they have reported the T4A on their return. If not, they'll be after them.
Scott replies that the refusal to provide the SIN was from an ordained minister assigned by Presbytery to provide pulpit supply. That's really disappointing to find that.
I had an instance once where I was speaking someplace and they issued me a check, but I signed the check over to the PCC because we don't take extra pay for our congregations, and it was for some special workshop. But they didn't ask me for my SIN number until the year end, and I said, oh no, I didn't cash that check. The PCC cashed it, so it wasn't income. They didn't give me a receipt for it because it wasn't income for me. So then they were like, oh, okay. So it's also good for people to know that you're going to issue them a T4A, or because in the end, I remember that.
Okay, thank you. Next question. I was advised in our audit that anyone you compensate over $500, you have to pay deductions for. So do you recommend that I try to get away with not doing that? You can only really know at the end of the year whether you should have taken EI out of their payment, because you really don't know how much you may be paying someone for the whole year.
My understanding was that EI and CPP taxes relate to employment situations, not contractors.
Right.
Okay.
I agree, Larry. Yeah.
Next question. We have paid a couple of people pulpit supply and they've asked us to write a check to the charity they're working with. Would we have to prepare a T4A? I guess that relates to what we were just talking about. Would this be a payment to a registered charity for the T3010?
No, because then your check is going to another charity.
Okay.
And that's fine. So in that case, your obligation is to record payments to to document just payments to another charity, but you've not actually paid an individual.
Yeah, I think when Karen was talking to that the last time, I wasn't sure if her response was right. I think if a church thinks that they're giving you an honorarium and you don't want it, then it would be helpful to say, you know, I don't want that, make a check payable to my employer. And I
Yeah.
think that's the situation here. As long as there's not a double payment situation.
That's right. That's right. Sometimes they don't ask. I always prefer when congregations ask, because I always tell them the check can be made to the PCC and it goes to offset Presbyterian sharing.
Right. Yeah.
And so then would this be a payment to a registered charity on the T3010?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. If you enter the CEBA repayment as an expense, do you then enter the $60 as income or just the $20 that was retained interest free?
Question. I haven't done any.
Okay.
Anybody else out there have any experience with this? They want to pipe in?
Does it all
You can
happen in
unmute
the
yourself.
same year? Because you may be recording the income in one year and then the expense on another.
Well, we never applied for a Ceba grant, and my understanding is that you get, is it up to 60,000, and if you pay it back within the period, you only have to pay 40,000 back. And I think it was in the news last night, they've just extended that for, at least for small businesses, for another year. So I presume that you'll record the 20,000 at some point when you complete you get a loan of 60,000. So it's neither income or expense. It's a loan. You owe 60,000. At some point, you get to the point where terms of say that you have to repay 40, but you can keep 20. So you record the repayment of the 40. So now you're sitting with a credit of 20 in your balance sheet. And then, so I presume what you would do is at that point, when you're told you can keep the 20,000, you record that as some kind of income. And I presume it's maybe a grant from the federal government, but I think that's how it would be recorded, and that would fall into whatever the right line is in your T3010 at some time.
If I could just chime in here for a minute, actually, it's Keith Mann, and when it comes to those sort of contingencies, that if you pay it off within a certain time, you can keep, the 20,000. Generally, CRA wants you to report the income right now, and if you don't pay it back, then you have to actually deduct it back off of your return. But that's for a standard income tax return, that is. So I sort of presume it'd be the same on the 2030-10 as well. If it's in a standard income tax return, you generally have to take it into income right now, and then you can actually deduct off again if for some reason you don't repay the loan and you don't get the actual 20,000. So that's generally CR's view when it comes to the actual income tax.
Yeah.
So I would sort of presume it's probably the same here too. They probably want it seen as income right now, and then you would actually deduct it back off again if you don't get it. But which is it's a bit strange. Maybe it's worth contacting the CRA on that, but it's a bit strange. But that's generally how it works.
Donna Carlo writes that CRA expects businesses to include it in income and then, yes, expense it according to her tax office.
And Pat wrote in, the company I work for did not claim the 20,000 as income. We'll be waiting until the actual time of repayment.
Yeah, I'm sure this is one of those things, where some will do it one way and some will do it the other. Accountants, tend to be conservative. So if there's any question, they tend to do it earlier. But because you can always fix it later anyways, but you can always deduct it back off if you don't get it. But You know, because it is a bit, and you would think you would have to sort of earn the income first by actually paying the loan, but that doesn't seem to be the way most accounting firms are doing it.
Somebody is asking, can one of you say, what is a Ceba grant? Canadian Employment, wasn't it?
It stands for business account. Yeah, it's Canadian Emergency Business Account.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's just a special loan that they set up through the bank, actually through all the chartered banks.
Great, thanks.
Okay, I think we have one more question. Are congregations reporting their investment funds at FMV on the 23010?
Yeah, I was reading that one while Keith was speaking. I am. I don't know what other congregations are doing, but it actually come up a bit in discussion, because I think on the CRA, the T3010, the investment income line 4580, I believe is reads as interest and dividend income. So to my mind, that's what, and I actually called on them last year. My understanding that is, if you like, T-slip type income. And so if you've got an amount of your investment income that's really an unrealized gain or a supposed loss, I don't think they expect that to be on the T3010, but I record it on my financial statements. And I think actually I called the National Church as well and spoke to someone there, and they told me a line to put that on, you know, the unrealized amount.
Right. So when you started doing it, you know, then you had, I mean, you might have had actually quite a substantial amount the first year that if you started doing it, because if you haven't done it in the past and all of a sudden you're doing it now, it could be a fairly substantial number.
Yeah, I didn't have that problem. It's fairly recent.
Okay, yeah, that's good, yeah. Because in this case here, if they haven't done it and still record on their balance sheet at a cost, and all of a sudden, of course, the actual value is quite a bit higher. And in the first year, you do it, as you point out, you're going to have an unrealized, gain on your income statement, like on your operating statement. But I guess that would be correct.
Yeah, I suppose conventional accounting response is that you'd have a note saying what happened and why you were changing your accounting.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, so what you're doing is you're not showing it on the information return, but you're showing it on your actual financials at fair market value.
Yeah, I basically broke down. What I did was take the total adjustment, if you like, the difference between what you had last year, like opening and closing, and said so much of that had to be interest and dividends because it had T-slips for interest and dividends, and the rest had to be the unrealized portion.
Right. Actually, we're not receiving any slips, from our portfolio. I'm not sure if we're supposed to be doing that or not.
Yeah.
But
From the consolidated portfolio?
Right.
You should be getting a report. You should be getting a report, I think, at least once a year, I think quarterly.
Right, okay. But we're not getting any actual slips like T5s or anything like that. Because of course, we're not going to pay income tax on them anyways, but
yeah,
I guess we don't receive actual T5s or T3s or anything like that.
Okay, there was one more question I hope has got a quick answer. Then I'm gonna wrap everything up. If anybody else wants to stay on and have like a short casual conversation before we shut the link down, that would be okay. But Marlene wanted to know the T3 dividend, thank you, read the T3 dividend being reported from the trustees. However, if the trustees remit money to the general fund, where do I report this?
You've got to go back, prepare a worksheet that shows all the revenue coming in from all your various funds, and then do an inter-fund elimination so that you don't double count the income in two sources.
Great. I want to say that we have a lot of very tenacious treasurers because we started this at 2 o'clock. It's now 4:12. And I'm hoping I have a lot of treasurers who are very happy that I'm not about to say, now let's go into the Pcc Statistical Report. So I'm hoping most of you can join us 2 weeks from now. We're going to do it at the same time, 2 p.m. And I don't think it'll take us 2 hours to go through the Pcc Statistical Report, but Larry tells me he finds it the hardest report to fill in. So I'm open for anything. Thanks for all your participation, keen treasurers. Always let me know if you want to help present a webinar in the future. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right.